The ventilator stopped. No alarms, no wild shouting, just a quiet, sharp silence. My lungs screamed for air as the pressure blanket held my legs, unyielding. The room buzzed with a faint electric hum, and beneath the sharp antiseptic, I caught the familiar cologne my son wore. William leaned over me. He whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom, but Amber's pregnant, and we need the house money now." In that moment, terror filled every corner of my mind. I was trapped, fully aware, unable to move, listening to my child justify what he was about to do. The cold air vanished from my throat. That's when I understood. The person I trusted most held all the power, and he'd decided to let me go. If someone you trusted held your life in their hands, would you see it coming? Subscribe now. This gets darker. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that the thought of their betrayal seemed impossible? Keep watching. 97 seconds. That's how long my brain went without oxygen. The doctors said I should have died. Instead, something happened no one could explain. My mind came back, and I remembered everything. Life has a way of shrinking to a single sense when you're kept in a hospital bed, not sure if you'll see the next hour. I was awake in ways the doctors didn't realize, floating between clear memories and sharp, panicked fear. That Thursday, the afternoon sun glared through the blinds, glancing off hospital equipment and settling on the face of my only son, William. I heard the nurse announce her shift end. I waited for the gentle squeeze of my hand she always gave me. Not today. She left. The room emptied. It was just William and me. My body wouldn't move, but I felt everything. The scratchy wool blanket trapped against my skin, the way my toes tingled with cold now that the ventilator wasn't pushing air. I heard the slow beep of my monitor drop, each gap between beats making the silence heavier. Then his voice, "You're not coming back, Mom. Your will leaves me the house, the savings. Amber and I can start over now." It wasn't grief in his voice, just tired, just ready to move on. I didn't feel like a person anymore, just a weight, a cost, a problem to be fixed. This was my son. I'd worked double shifts to put him through school, kept him clothed and fed. Was I just a number to him now? But my mind wouldn't give up. I counted every second I was trapped without air. I heard the clatter of trays outside my door, the click of a nurse's heels. I tried to scream but produced nothing but silence. We think our children could never turn on us. We're wrong. If you think betrayal could never sneak into your life, you haven't been there yet. Suddenly, I tasted metal. My vision grayed at the edges. But I didn't die. Not then. They say the brain can reboot itself when pushed to the edge. As the crash team stormed in, alarms finally blaring, I felt a spark deep inside, a reminder that I wasn't gone. Not yet. 97 seconds without air, long enough to change everything. The doctors couldn't understand. I shouldn't have survived. But as the noise faded, so did their assumptions. My last thought before losing consciousness wasn't about dying. It was about outlasting them and making sure the story didn't end here. When the crash team burst through the door, the world snapped into chaos. I couldn't shout, couldn't move, couldn't even flinch when they hit my chest with cold paddles. But somewhere inside, a single nerve trembled to life. My right index finger twitched once, then again. I saw shapes moving above me, the sharp voice of the attending nurse, the worried hush from William standing in the corner. My body was a cage, and every instinct screamed to break free. William was beside me by the time the beeping picked up. He squeezed my limp hand, fake tears in his voice telling the nurses it must have been the machine's fault. Just a fluke. He played his part perfectly. To the world, he was a model son. To me, he was a stranger with a secret. Inside my head, the fear settled like fog. I was alive but invisible. I realized then I had to keep my awareness a secret. If he suspected I knew, I wouldn't get another chance. He was careful. He never spoke when nurses were near. but when we were alone, his eyes were cold. For 72 hours, I stayed quiet, listening to every conversation, reliving every memory, searching for a way to signal I was still there. I learned more about people in those hours than I had in 70 years. I learned that kindness can crumble, that greed can hide behind a smile. For now, I waited, counting heartbeats, planning, hoping someone would see what my own child wanted so desperately to hide. This wasn't a moment of sadness or desperation. It was the fruit of planning, the slow work of someone convinced that doing wrong was somehow right. My son had planned my end for months, but I was awake, and I would remember everything. Months before the hospital, I started feeling off during William's visits. He brought me a fancy chamomile tea, a treat Amber found online. I thanked him, never questioning why I felt dull and heavy afterwards. My thoughts blurred, memories slipped. I blamed age, I blamed stress. But now, stuck in that bed, every detail came rushing back. The soft taste of the tea, the heavy sweetness at the bottom of each cup, the way Amber would ask, so casual, about the house near Richmond, "Do you ever think about selling?" Or William's half-joking push, "Maybe we should get your will squared away, just in case." It's clear in hindsight. Alone, each gesture felt normal. Together, they painted a clear picture. One night, after I'd come to from sleep, I caught the tail end of William's call with Amber. Compassionate sedation protocol. So she isn't in pain. I heard her agree from the other room. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to ignore it. Denial smooths the sharpest spikes of fear, but it rarely saves us from what comes next. In the hospital bed, I understood it all. William and Amber planting seeds, checking paperwork, grooming the doctors and neighbors with stories about my growing confusion. Amber smiled at the nurses, telling them I'd admitted I didn't want to be a burden. William joked about my forgetfulness to anyone who'd listen. Lies slipped in quietly, hidden behind daily concern. The most dangerous attacks come dressed as care. Sometimes, the ones you trust most build the perfect trap, and you thank them for it. Type, "I see it," if you recognize the warning signs. I realized the tea and that creeping fog in my head were never just signs of age. They were the start of everything. When I lay in my bed listening to the hospital at night, I pieced together the whole truth. William hadn't tried to end things only once. He'd practiced, testing how close he could get before anyone noticed. And now, caught between the world of the living and the silent audience of the near-dead, I felt the full weight of betrayal. My only hope was that someone, anyone, might finally look past the performance and see the truth. For now, every blink, every twitch was my only weapon. So I held on, waiting for my moment. Code blue, room 417. 3 days before the ventilator stopped for good, chaos crashed into my world for the first time. I heard the word malfunction, saw flashes. William's hands thrown up, convincing tears, Amber pacing the hall. But now, everything fit. This wasn't an accident. It was the first rehearsal. I remembered the panic. Nurses stormed my side, voices tangled with urgency. I felt them press on my chest, a cold prick of medicine. My heart began again, but the story always stopped at William's word. She must have rolled over and pulled the cord free. I never heard that cord snap. I never moved an inch. My body wouldn't let me. From my window into the hallway, I noticed the small details. William's habit of visiting during the shift swaps, Amber always outside in the parking lot, waiting to get updates on her phone. The cameras pointed toward the doors, not my bed. After they left, nobody talked about it again. But as I lay there, becoming more certain by the hour, I realized something. To my family, I was both precious and expendable. William's medical training didn't bring comfort. It was his mask. They missed it twice. You won't miss what happens next. Subscribe before the truth surfaces. That night, as the world at large spun on, a young night nurse made her rounds. Her steps were easy, patient. She checked my chart, watched my monitors. For a moment, she hesitated. She leaned close, her of dark eyes searching mine, and whispered, "Mrs. Gable, if you can understand me, blink twice." My heart thundered. This was my chance. I blinked once, fighting panic. Then again, slow, deliberate. The nurse's eyes widened ever so slightly, but she didn't flee. She shifted her chair beside me, blocking the view from the hallway. She whispered, "Blink once for yes, twice for no. Are you in danger?" I blinked once, barely breathing. She nodded. "Is it a family member?" Blink. "Is it your son?" Blink. "Did he hurt you on purpose?" Blink again. I watched understanding settle in her features, a look I hadn't seen in weeks. The nurse told me her name was Daniela Serrano. She spoke in a hush, explaining her grandmother's story in Miami, how a trusted nephew drained her accounts while family said she was just old, confused, how no one believed her until it was nearly too late. "That's why I watch," Daniela whispered. "Everybody else is blind to what they don't want to see." She promised to go to patient advocacy, not to William or the doctors. She knew where silence could cost a life. She squeezed my hand just once, so gently. "If I'm right, when the investigation begins, your son may get desperate. Can you hold on for 48 hours? I blinked once. I could do that much. I had to. Within those small acts, a blink, a question, a promise, I found a new hope. Someone finally saw me, not as a patient to be managed, but as a person caught in someone else's plan. We often underestimate which details matter. The blink, the whispered question, the courage to put yourself at risk standing up for a stranger. Daniela gave me 2 gifts that night, belief and a chance. That's when I understood. Sometimes salvation comes in the quietest of moments, the tiniest of movements, the courage of someone willing to look a little closer when no one else will. Daniela didn't waste the 48 hours. By sunrise, patient advocacy had filed an emergency petition for independent neurological assessment. By noon, Dr. Regina Ballard, a forensic neurologist from Duke, was standing at my bedside with equipment William had never requested. She was precise. No nonsense. She attached sensors to my scalp, studied monitors, asked me to follow commands with my eyes. Look up, look left, blink 3 times. I did every single one. William's doctors had never asked me to do anything. They assumed I couldn't. Dr. Regina Ballard stepped back, reviewing the EEG readout. "Full brain activity," she murmured. "Cognitive function intact." She looked at Daniela, then back at me. "Mrs. Gable, you're not minimally conscious. You're locked in. You've been aware this whole time, haven't you?" I blinked once. Yes. She pulled William's medical timeline, cross-checked it with her findings. The inconsistencies jumped out. Dates that didn't match, treatments that made no sense for stroke recovery. Dr. Regina Ballard's face hardened. She turned to Daniela. "Something's very wrong here. Have you ever been dismissed when you knew something was wrong? That ends here." Dr. Regina Ballard ordered a full toxicology panel, something that hadn't been done since admission. "Standard protocol," she said, but I knew better. She suspected foul play. When the results came back 3 hours later, she closed the file, looked directly at the camera in my room, and said to the nurse, "Call Adult Protective Services immediately, and security. No one from the family enters this room until they arrive." What she'd found in my blood wasn't just medication, it was evidence. Propofol. The levels in my system were consistent with surgical anesthesia, not stroke treatment. Dr. Regina Ballard's report was clinical and damning. These concentrations suppress consciousness artificially. They're inconsistent with prescribed protocols and can only be explained by external administration. I heard her explain it to the investigator from Adult Protective Services. Propofol isn't used for stroke patients. It's a sedative used in operating rooms, controlled and monitored. Finding it in my blood meant someone gave it to me deliberately, someone who had access to it. The investigator, a woman named Teresa Mendoza, sat beside my bed with a notepad. She asked yes or no questions, and I answered with blinks. Do you know who gave you this medication? Yes. Is it someone in your family? Yes. Your son? Yes. She wrote everything down. Meanwhile, Dr. Regina Ballard showed her the dosage logs from William's cardiology practice. Pharmacy records traced back to his clinic. Small amounts taken over months, never enough to raise flags. The timeline matched perfectly with my confused episodes back in Richmond. The foggy mornings after William's visits, the moments I couldn't remember conversations. Through my door window, I watched William arrive for his usual afternoon visit. A security guard stopped him at the nurse's station. I saw the conversation unfold, the guard explaining new restrictions, William's face shifting from confusion to controlled anger. He demanded to speak with someone in charge. That's when Teresa stepped out. She introduced herself calmly, professionally. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw William's reaction. For just a second, his mask slipped. Fear flashed across his face before he recovered, smoothing his expression back into concerned son mode. Amber called him. I watched him pull out his phone, step away, his voice rising slightly. He hung up fast, jaw tight. The investigator asked to see William's financial records. Hospital administration said they'd need a warrant for that. The investigator smiled and said, "Already have one, and we're executing it at his practice in 2 hours." That's when I saw fear cross my son's face. Real, undeniable fear. $127,000. Gone. Transferred from my savings to William's accounts over 6 months. Cryptocurrency losses. Amber's credit card payments. A deposit on a lake house they planned to buy. All funded by small withdrawals just under the reporting threshold. Teresa sat beside me the next morning, explaining what the forensic accountant found. She asked questions with her notepad ready. Did you authorize these transfers? No. Did you know about the cryptocurrency investments? No. Did you sign documents giving William access to your accounts? No. The evidence was damning. Forged authorization signatures on bank paperwork, online banking access from William's IP address, traced to his home computer and his phone, wire transfers dated to match his hospital visits, even a real estate contract for the house sale, scheduled 1 week after what William told the agent was my expected passing. But the worst discovery came from my medical files. Tucked inside was a new will, dated 3 months ago during one of my confused periods. Everything went to William immediately. No trust structure, no conditions, no safeguards. Just a clean transfer the moment I died. A handwriting expert had already examined it. The signature looked like mine, but the pressure points were off, the angle wrong. Someone had traced my signature, probably from an old document. The closer they looked, the worse it got. Subscribe if you need to see justice happen. If you're watching without subscribing, comment, "Why?" I read them all. Then Teresa showed me the piece of evidence that changed everything. Recovered from William's laptop, deleted files he thought were gone forever. Google search history spanning months. How long can someone survive without ventilator? Legal definition of brain death in North Carolina. Statute of limitations, elder abuse. Compassionate end of life care legal protection. How to make stroke look natural. Each search was time-stamped. The earliest one dated back over a year, long before my stroke. This wasn't a desperate decision made in a moment of financial panic. This was a plan, methodically researched, carefully executed. Teresa closed her folder. "Mrs. Gable, I need you to understand what we're looking at here. This is attempted murder, premeditated. We're building a criminal case and you're the key witness. But there's a problem. Locked-in syndrome patients have never testified in a North Carolina court. We're going to have to fight for your right to speak." I blinked once. I understood. I was ready to fight. The DA was contacted that afternoon. By evening, an arrest warrant was issued. The charges: attempted murder, elder abuse, fraud, identity theft, and forgery. William had no idea what was coming. They arrested him in the hospital lobby. I couldn't see it, but Daniela described every second. William in handcuffs, Amber screaming about lawyers, hospital security holding back visitors who'd gathered to watch. The charges read aloud: attempted murder, elder abuse, fraud, and identity theft. Daniela stayed with me while it happened. She held my hand, telling me it was over. I was safe now. But I didn't feel safe yet. I felt numb. 20 minutes later, they walked William past my room. He was flanked by officers, wrists bound behind his back. Our eyes met through the glass window. For a moment, time stopped. This was my son, the baby I'd rocked to sleep, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, the man I'd trusted with my life. He didn't look sad. He didn't look sorry. He looked at me with cold calculation, like he was already working out his next move, his next angle, his next lie. Forgiveness is complicated when someone tries to kill you. If you understand that, drop a comment. Daniela squeezed my hand. "You're going to be okay, Mrs. Gable." We got him. But as William disappeared down the hallway, I felt something unexpected. Not relief, not satisfaction, just profound grief for the child I'd raised who'd grown into someone capable of this. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost my son, maybe years ago. Maybe I'd never really known him at all. The legal process moved quickly. William's lawyer arrived within hours, already building a defense strategy. I heard snippets from Daniela, claims of misunderstanding, William's stellar reputation as a cardiologist, character witnesses lining up to vouch for him. Amber was released without charges for now. She'd cooperated immediately, giving statements about William's planning. But her lawyer negotiated carefully, keeping her options open. As they led him away, William looked back at my room. Our eyes met through the glass. And I saw something I'd never seen before. Not remorse, not shame, just cold calculation. Like he was already planning his next move. And he was. Because the security footage, the evidence Daniela thought would seal the case. William's lawyer found a problem. Technicality. That's the word William's defense attorney kept using. The ventilator disconnect during shift change. No cameras caught him doing it. The propofol in my system, circumstantial without direct administration proof. The financial transfers, he claimed I'd authorized everything verbally before the stroke. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Nina Sharma, visited me to explain the challenges. Mrs. Gable, locked-in syndrome victims have never testified in a North Carolina criminal court. The defense is arguing you can't be a reliable witness. They're claiming your memories are trauma-distorted, that the medications affected your cognition. She asked questions through blinks, growing more frustrated with each answer. How could she convey my story to a jury when I couldn't speak? How could she prove what William said when he unplugged me, when no recording existed? William's defense strategy became clear quickly. Character witnesses lined up, colleagues praising his medical expertise, neighbors describing his devotion to me, patients thanking him for saving their lives. His lawyer painted him as a grieving son, facing impossible decisions about his mother's end-of-life care. Amber's pregnancy was mentioned repeatedly, playing the sympathy card. A young couple, financial stress, a dying mother who'd verbally expressed wishes not to be kept alive artificially. The defense was building a narrative of mercy, not murder. They even found medical experts willing to claim my memories were unreliable, that locked-in syndrome patients often confuse dreams with reality, that the trauma of oxygen deprivation could create false memories. Nina Sharma worked tirelessly, reviewing every piece of evidence. Daniela's detailed notes from our first blink conversation, Dr. Regina Ballard's willingness to testify about the propofol levels, the forensic accountant ready to explain the financial theft. Then Nina Sharma showed me a photograph that changed everything. Security camera, parking lot, 3 days before my son first unplugged me. Time-stamped 11:47 p.m. William and Amber in his car, interior light on. She's holding what looks like medical files. My files, I realized. He's holding a syringe, examining it under the dome light. But the damning detail was William's phone, propped on the dashboard. The screen was visible, zoomed in on an image. Nina Sharma had the tech team enhance it. It was a picture of my ICU room layout. The ventilator was marked with a red X. "This is premeditation," Nina Sharma said quietly. "This is proof they planned it. The defense can't explain this away." I blinked once, then again. Finally, evidence that couldn't be twisted or dismissed. The trial date was set. 6 weeks out, Nina Sharma promised she'd fight for my right to testify, to tell my story in my own words. But first, she needed to solve one impossible problem: how to give a locked-in syndrome patient a voice the jury would accept. Dr. Regina Ballard had an idea. They said I couldn't testify. Locked-in syndrome patients have never been accepted as witnesses in North Carolina criminal court. But Dr. Regina Ballard had an idea: eye-tracking technology connected to a speech synthesizer. If I could spell words with my eyes, I could speak. The device arrived 2 weeks later, a screen mounted on a stand, cameras tracking my eye movements, software that turned my gaze into letters. At first, it was maddeningly slow. I'd look at the letter H and hold my gaze for 2 seconds. The computer would register it. Then E, then L, then P. My first full sentence took 11 minutes to complete. I want to tell my story. Nina Sharma, the prosecutor, worked with me daily. She'd ask questions and I'd spell out answers one painstaking letter at a time. The emotional weight of finally having a voice, even this slow, mechanical one, nearly broke me. For weeks I'd been trapped with my thoughts, unable to share them. Now, word by word, I could speak. The therapy helped too. My facial muscles began responding, tiny movements at first, a twitch in my cheek, a slight lift of my eyebrow. The doctors said recovery from locked-in syndrome was rare but possible with intensive work. I threw everything into it. Meanwhile, William's defense team filed motion after motion, too experimental, unreliable, traumatized witness with distorted memories. They argued the device could be manipulated, that someone could guide my eyes, that my responses weren't truly my own thoughts. The judge scheduled a hearing to determine admissibility. Dr. Regina Ballard testified about the technology, its accuracy rate, its use in research settings. She demonstrated how it worked, showing the judge that my responses were deliberate and consistent. The defense brought their own expert, a neurologist who claimed locked-in patients often experience confusion and false memories. Nina Sharma countered with videos of my training sessions, complex questions requiring detailed, coherent answers that proved my mental clarity. After 3 hours of testimony, the judge made his ruling. Mrs. Gable has the right to be heard. I'll allow it. The trial date was set for 6 weeks out. Nina Sharma prepared me for cross-examination, warning me the defense would try to rattle me, to make me seem uncertain or confused. We practiced for hours each day, her asking aggressive questions, me spelling out calm, precise responses. But 2 weeks before court, I received a visitor I never expected, Amber. She came alone during approved visitor hours, sat down next to my bed, and said, "Florence, I need to tell you something William doesn't know." "I'm not pregnant," Amber whispered, her hands shaking. "I never was. William told me to say that to justify everything, but I can't do this anymore. I can't watch him destroy you and then destroy me when he's done." Daniela stood in the corner, witness to every word. I used the device to respond, eyes moving deliberately across the letters. "Why now?" Amber's face crumpled. "Because he told me last night that after you're gone and he gets the money, I'm next. He's already got the insurance policy, $2 million. He showed me the paperwork like it was some kind of joke, but I saw his eyes. The same cold look he had when he talked about you." She explained everything. William had been planning this for over a year, long before my stroke. The pregnancy story was his idea. Create urgency, justify desperate measures. She'd watched him research methods online, seen the Google searches he thought he'd deleted. When she questioned him, he'd threatened her. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quiet promises about what would happen if she didn't cooperate. The physical abuse started small, a tight grip on her arm, a shove against the wall. By the time she understood what he was capable of, she was too scared to leave. The lake house they'd planned to buy, that was a lie, too. William had a mistress, a pharmaceutical rep he'd been seeing for 8 months. The house was for her. Amber found out 3 weeks before my stroke when she checked his phone. "He doesn't love me," Amber said, tears streaming down her face. "He never did. I was just useful. Someone who'd play the grieving daughter-in-law role while he killed you. Someone who'd give him an alibi. But I'm done. I won't let him do this anymore." I spelled out my next question slowly. "Will you testify?" She nodded. "That's why I'm here. I already contacted the prosecutor. I'm making a deal. I tell them everything I know and they'll reduce my charges. But Florence, you need to understand. William's going to fight this with everything he has. His lawyer is good. They're going to try to destroy your credibility, make you look confused and unreliable. Are you ready for that?" I blinked once. Yes, I'd never been more ready for anything. Some betrayals run deeper than you think. Subscribe. The courtroom reveals everything. Daniela walked Amber out after she signed her statement. The prosecutor arrived within the hour to take her formal deposition. Amber spent 3 hours detailing everything: the planning, the threats, the mistress, the fake pregnancy, the insurance policy. Nina Sharma called me that evening with good news. Amber's testimony is devastating. Between her statement and the evidence we already have, the defense is going to have a very hard time painting William as a caring son making difficult decisions. But William's legal team had one more card to play. The morning of the trial, they filed an emergency motion. I was incompetent to testify due to neurological damage, and they had a doctor willing to say the eye-tracking device responses weren't truly my own thoughts. The judge would rule in 1 hour. If he sided with the defense, I'd never get to tell my story. William would walk free. Everything Daniela, Dr. Regina Ballard, Nina Sharma, and Amber had done would mean nothing. I waited, counting the minutes, praying for one more chance to speak. The courtroom went silent when they wheeled me in. I could move my right hand partially now, my facial muscles responding more each day, but I still needed the device. William sat 20 feet away, expensive suit, practiced remorse on his face. We hadn't been this close since he tried to kill me. The judge had ruled in my favor that morning. I could testify. The jury would decide if they believed me. Nina Sharma started with basic questions, establishing my awareness. "Mrs. Gable, do you understand where you are?" My eyes moved across the screen. "Yes, courtroom." "Do you understand the charges against your son?" "Yes, attempted murder, elder abuse." "Fraud?" "Are you here voluntarily to tell your story?" "Yes." The jury watched intently as I spelled out my testimony, letter by letter. I told them about the ventilator stopping, about hearing William's voice. "I'm sorry, Mom, but Amber's pregnant and we need the house money now." About the 97 seconds without air, about the locked-in syndrome that followed. Nina Sharma played the security footage from the parking lot, William and Amber in the car, the syringe, the phone screen showing my ICU room with the ventilator marked. Several jurors leaned forward, faces tight with concentration. Daniela testified next, explaining the blink conversation, how she'd recognized the signs of elder abuse from her own grandmother's case. Dr. Regina Ballard followed with the propofol findings, the artificial suppression of consciousness, the impossibility of it being accidental. Amber's testimony came after lunch. She was calm, direct, devastating. She described the planning, the threats, the insurance policy, the mistress. William's face went white. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. The financial expert connected every transfer, every forged signature, every calculated theft. The timeline was undeniable. William had been systematically draining my accounts while keeping me medicated and confused. Cross-examination was brutal. The defense attorney attacked the device, questioned my memories, suggested the medications had distorted my perception. But I'd practiced for this. My responses were steady, precise, unshakable. Finally, Nina Sharma asked me to look at William and spell one message for the jury. I turned my head slowly until our eyes met. The courtroom held its breath. My gaze moved across the screen, selecting each letter deliberately. You calculated when my life became worth less than my death. That was your biggest mistake. 2 jurors wiped tears. Others stared at William with open disgust. His composure cracked. He stood up, started to shout something, but the judge silenced him immediately. Deliberation took 4 hours. When the jury returned, the 4-person stood. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, elder abuse, fraud, identity theft, forgery. Sentencing came 2 weeks later, 22 years without parole. As they led him away in chains, William looked at me one last time. No calculation now, just the face of a child caught doing something unforgivable. I felt something unexpected, not satisfaction, but profound sadness for the son I'd raised who'd become a stranger capable of this. I'd won, but winning felt like losing in ways I'd never fully escape. 6 months after the trial, I stood at a podium in Richmond. No wheelchair, no device, just my own voice, halting, rebuilding, but mine. I told a room full of healthcare advocates and elder rights attorneys about the 3 weeks I spent trapped inside my body. The recovery hadn't been easy. Intensive speech therapy 5 days a week, relearning how to form words, how to control my breath, physical rehabilitation to regain movement in my legs, my arms. Most days were frustrating, progress measured in millimeters. But I kept going. I sold the Church Hill house on my terms, keeping only the things that mattered: photos, my late husband's books, the quilt my mother made. Everything else went to auction. The money funded something new, the Florence Gable Foundation for ICU patient rights and elder abuse detection. Daniela sat in the front row, now enrolled in nursing school on a scholarship I'd established. She'd saved my life with one whispered question. Now I was helping her build the career she deserved. My speech focused on the warning signs, the patterns that emerge when someone close decides you're worth more dead than alive, the gradual isolation, the gaslighting about memory and confusion, the helpful suggestions about updating legal documents, the medications that make you feel foggy and lost. After I finished, a woman approached me crying. My father's caregiver is doing exactly what you described. The tea, the confusion, the pushing for power of attorney. I thought I was being paranoid. But now I'm going to get help. You just saved his life. That moment, right there, made everything worth it. 3 hospitals had already adopted new protocols based on my case. Mandatory independent neurological assessments for patients in minimally conscious states, better monitoring of family access to medical equipment, training for nurses on recognizing signs of elder abuse in ICU settings. Daniela's scholarship fund expanded to 10 students, young people from underserved communities who wanted to enter healthcare, who'd bring fresh eyes and fierce protective instincts to patient care. National media covered my story. I did interviews, spoke at conferences, consulted with lawmakers on elder abuse legislation. The grief for William never fully left, but it transformed into purpose. I couldn't change what he'd done, but I could make sure others didn't suffer the same way. I processed my grief in therapy, learning to separate the child I'd raised from the man he'd become. Evil doesn't always announce itself with horns and a pitchfork. Sometimes it wears a familiar face and calls you mom. Finding peace didn't require forgiveness. It required acceptance that some things can't be fixed or explained. After my speech, a young prosecutor from Florida approached me. She had a case, eerily familiar pattern, adult child, life insurance, suspicious medical proxy decisions. She asked if I'd consult. I said yes, because I survived. And now, every person I help save is my answer to what my son tried to take. This morning, 18 months after the verdict, a letter arrived at my new apartment. Prison postmark. No return name needed. I recognized William's handwriting instantly. My hand hovered over the envelope for 5 minutes. Then I opened it. The letter wasn't an apology. 3 pages of self-pity and blame deflection. Prison was hard. The other inmates treated him poorly. He'd only been trying to help me. The stroke had left me with no quality of life, and ending my suffering had seemed merciful. Amber had pressured him. The financial stress had clouded his judgment. He'd made mistakes, yes, but his intentions had been good. He asked me to write to the parole board supporting his early release, said we were family, that I owed him a second chance after all he'd sacrificed, raising himself while I worked 2 jobs, said forgiveness was what good mothers do. I read every word. No anger rose. No tears fell. I walked to my fireplace, the one feature I'd specifically wanted in this new place. The letter went into the flames. I watched the paper curl and blacken, the ink bleeding into ash. His words dissolved into smoke that drifted up the chimney and disappeared. Not dramatic, not vengeful, just quiet, deliberate, final. Drop the one moment from this story that you'll carry with you. I read every comment. I watched until nothing remained but ash. That was the last piece of power he held over me, and I released it the same way I released him, completely. I survived when he calculated I wouldn't. Every morning I wake up free, speaking with my own voice, helping someone else recognize the danger I almost missed. That's not revenge. That's resurrection. And it's the only answer he'll ever get from me. Through the window, I saw Daniela's car pull up for our weekly coffee. She waved, smiling, her nursing textbooks visible on the passenger seat. We'd become family in the way that mattered, not through blood, but through the choice to show up for each other when it counted most. I turned away from the fireplace, leaving the ashes behind. My apartment was bright, filled with plants and photos of former students who'd reached out after hearing my story. My calendar showed 3 speaking engagements next month, 2 consultations with prosecutors, 1 interview with a documentary crew. This was my life now, not the one I'd planned or expected, but the one I'd fought for and earned. William had tried to reduce me to a number in a bank account, a problem to be solved, a burden to be eliminated. Instead, I became a voice for the voiceless. A warning system for the vulnerable, a warrior who turned her nightmare into someone else's salvation. That was my revenge. That was my victory. That was my resurrection.